Chapter 66 Eccentric Rule. Chapter 66 Eccentric Rule. Sect leader Ma's generous attitude made it clear to Han Li that as long as any conditions he brought up were not excessive, the sect would most likely deliver it. With the sect's help, his anticipated objective could be easily reached. But then again, this kind of generous treatment was not often seen in the entire Seven Mysteries sect. It was obvious that the leaders of the sect were fully aware of the importance a highly talented medicinal god had for cultivators in Jianghu. As a result, Han Li did not hold back and asked that God Hand Valley would be handed over to be his personal residence. He claimed that he did not want outsiders to disturb him in the valley while he researched and studied the art of healing. This condition was not one that was naturally accepted by sect leader Ma. The sect leader probably wanted to rope in Han Li and unexpectedly took the initiative to offer Han Li a young and pretty maid to serve his daily needs. Han Li, suddenly faced with this unexpected bargaining chip, felt his heartbeat quicken, and just as he was about to tacitly agree, he calmed down and thought of all the secrets he was hiding. Feeling a bit distressed, Han Li rejected the offer. Han Li's action caused the sect leader Ma to show considerable admiration and to view him in a new light. He continued to compliment Han Li, saying that at such a young age, Han Li was quite handsome and that if sect leader Ma had a daughter, he would marry her to Han Li. Han Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry at these words because it wasn't that he rejected feminine charm but that he couldn't afford to at this moment. And just like this, the entire God Hand Valley became Han Li's private territory. Outsiders were not allowed to casually enter. Regarding any visitors, Han Li specifically placed a large clock at the entrance of the valley. It didn't matter who wanted to meet Han Li, they just needed to strike the clock, and Han Li would promptly exit the valley to meet them. This eccentric rule was written in bold characters next to the clock. Even a few of the middle to upper rank members could not avoid this rule. The reason why Han Li laid down this eccentric rule was to completely prevent any last possibility of the secret of his bottle from leaking out. As long as no one broke into the mountain valley, Han Li could guarantee the bottle's heaven-defying properties from being known by a second party. At first, this rule was not an issue for the lower-ranked disciples, but it caused many high-ranking members to be very dissatisfied. They believed Han Li viewed himself too highly, not knowing how high the sky was or how deep the earth was. Not even Dr. Mo was this haughty, so how could Han Li, a trifling disciple who just finished his apprenticeship, dare to act so presumptuously? But after Han Li saved someone who suffered a heavy and life-threatening wound from the brink of death and aided in his recovery, all signs of complaint disappeared without a trace, and no one brought up the eccentric rule again. No one wanted to offend someone who may save their lives countless times like the medicinal god over a small and trivial matter. They naturally believed that forcing visitors to ring a bell to meet him was a strange habit unique to temperamental medicinal gods. The following days passed one by one, and even the sect elders gradually followed Han Li's rule. When they wanted to ask for medical help, they would send someone to respectfully sound the big clock to call for Han Li. God Hand Valley's eccentric rule gradually turned Han Li into a legend of sorts in the Seven Mysteries sects. What was ridiculous was that he was not even ranked in the sect. He didn't have a high-ranking position, nor did he hold any position of power. He was still a low-ranking disciple. But then again, who has seen such a popular disciple in the sect? Even the sect elders who came to visit him would address him as Dr. Han. Not many people dared to directly address Han Li by his name. Of course, this did not apply to Li Feiyu, also known to Han Li as Senior Disciple Li. Li Feiyu still maintained his cold and detached disposition in front of others, but every time he saw Han Li, he became sloppy and carefree. His treatment of Han Li had not been changed by his new identity as a medicinal god, unlike Fatty Wang and the other disciples who had drifted apart and became more respectful. There were no traces of politeness whenever Li Feiyu addressed Han Li by his name. This made Han Li feel a bit of gratitude. He still wasn't accustomed to living a life of solitude. Just thinking about Li Feiyu's expression whenever he laughed, Han Li couldn't help but think of another individual's face. Recently, he unexpectedly met someone else who had ridden the same carriage as Han Li up the mountains several years ago. Now an inner sect member of the Seven Supreme Division, Wu Yang had contracted a strange illness that was untreatable by all of the doctors who were sent to treat him, tormenting him to no ends. In the end, he had no choice but to use sect leader Ma's name to ask for Han Li's help to cure his illness. Wu Yang's memory was quite good, and when he met the famous Dr. Han, he recognized with a single glance that he was one of the children who came on the same carriage as him. Han Li. His face revealed a shocked look that was still fresh in Han Li's memory to this day. That year, Wu Yang's attitude towards Han Li was not exceptionally good, even a bit vile. Seeing Wu Yang's awkward appearance, Han Li truly felt like laughing. Normally, he would not treat Wu Yang's illness because of their shared history, but in order to not damage his reputation as a medicinal god, he even increased the amount of prescribed medicine so that Wu Yang would recover from his illness in 2 short days. During the period of recovery, however, the large amount of prescribed medicine made Wu Yang suffer even more pain. This was Han Li's way of lightly reprimanding the previously vile-tempered youth. Han Li was not as magnanimous as he appeared to be. He wouldn't forget a single grudge. Just like this, Han Li slowly replaced Dr. Mo's position on the mountain and was even considered to be 1 tier above Dr. Mo. In God Hand Valley, Han Li would take out the small bottle, put it inside an empty space within the valley, and allowed the mysterious green liquid to form every 7 to 8 days. With the mysterious green liquid, he would hasten the growth of rare and ancient herbs, which he would refine into medicine with the utmost care. Only a small portion of these herbs were used on those who visited him to seek medical aid. The majority of the herbs were taken and used for Han Li's personal use. He would use them to cultivate and refine Yuan Qi and to push forward in his cultivation of the eternal spring arts. Han Li gently shifted the body within the late Dr. Mo's chair to find a more comfortable position. Although the chair he sat on was indeed Dr. Mo's armchair, this place was not Dr. Mo's house but rather Han Li's residence. He had taken all the items he thought would be useful from Dr. Mo's house and, with no trace of politeness, claimed them as his own, moving them into his own residence. As for the position in which Han Li was sitting, even if someone saw his disrespectful actions, they would not do anything because in their eyes, the current Han Li's worth far exceeded that of Dr. Mo's. People were surprisingly very realistic and practical. Dr. Mo's residence was far bigger than Han Li's, so moving into the bigger house would have been more suitable. Unfortunately, Han Li thought that living there was a bit weird. After all, he was the main cause of Dr. Mo's death. Brazenly living in the house of someone he killed with his own hand would cause his heart to become heavy and cold. As a result, living in his own residence was far more reassuring and comfortable to Han Li. However, whenever he thought of Dr. Mo, Han Li would naturally be unable to forget the sad fact that he was still under the control of a dead person. In the period of time after Dr. Mo's death, he carefully examined his own body, both internally and externally, countless times. He was still unable to refine that thread of cold yin qi hidden within his dantian. Han Li tried to use the pure spirit powder and other famous poison dispelling methods, but sadly none of them were effective. It seemed like the long journey he would have to take in 1 year's time was unavoidable. Chapter 67 Fireball Technique. Chapter 67 Fireball Technique. Han Li, who had been sitting still for half a day, suddenly raised his left hand and straightened one of his fingers, making him appear unfathomably mysterious. But not long after, the space half an inch away from his erect fingertips suddenly fluctuated, and several small sparks of fire appeared. When the sparks first appeared, they immediately made a Zila sound as they twisted and turned in the air to form a walnut-sized ball of red flames. Although this fireball was not big, a blistering heat emanated from this small ball of fire, permeating the entire room. As Han Li reclined, his face was still covered by his book. He appeared to be asleep, if not for the fact that the small fireball at the tip of his finger continued to release Zila. Zila, sounds of high-temperature combustions. This, coupled with his unmoving fingertip, made Han Li appear particularly eye-catching. As minutes inched by, the fireball continued to maintain the same vigorous energy, not revealing any hint of being extinguished. However, Han Li eventually shifted. The finger he used to support the fireball started to tremble slightly. The trembling from his finger grew to affect his wrist, then his entire arm. Soon, even his whole body started to tremble. Abruptly, Han Li sat up on the armchair, not even aware that the book had fallen away from his face and onto the ground. His 2 eyes stared unwaveringly at the fireball on his fingertips, his face red from holding his breath. From his forehead to his neck, His exposed skin revealed many small beads of sweat, appearing as if he had just finished performing some intense exercise that made his body overheat. After a short while, the fireball started to sway alongside Han Li's intense rocking. The floating flame would be large in one moment, then small in the next, unable to maintain a constant state. Not long after, it became small once again. The flame shrank into a spark and dissipated into thin air. Once the fireball disappeared, Han Li felt like a man who had his backbone removed. His fireball had greatly consumed his energy. Extremely drained, he reclined his body once more on the chair. This fireball technique is vexing to train in. Even though I've researched this technique for half a year, I'm still unable to have complete control over it. The most I can manage is extend its duration by a little bit. Talking to himself, Han Li stared at the ceiling. It turned out that the last few pages of the Eternal Spring Arts book contained several magic techniques. At first glance, it was evident that these were beginner-level techniques for cultivators who just entered the sect. Since all he knew was the Eternal Spring Arts incantation, this made Han Li feel like he obtained a treasure, and for several consecutive nights, he was unable to sleep due to his excitement. Since he had witnessed firsthand Dr. Mo using a few of the magic techniques, it was no surprise that he would be this excited. Han Li had found Dr. Mo's strength terrifying, so he viewed the formidable collection of techniques with great interest. Unfortunately for Han Li, who was currently at the peak of the 6th layer of the Eternal Spring Arts incantation, he was like a beggar holding a golden bowl and asking for alms. Since he was never taught any basic magic technique, he was unable to perform even the simplest spell. But now he suddenly came upon several technique incantations. How could he not be pleased? The final pages of the book had 5 techniques and their respective incantations. They were Fireball, Soullock Talisman, Imperial Flight, Telekinesis, and Heaven's Eye. To Han Li, all of the techniques and their incantations were still very ancient, profound, and hard to comprehend. This was no surprise since the incantations were composed of words and phrases from an ancient language. Even though he had read quite a few books, he had a very superficial understanding of the ancient texts, so he was unable to immediately grasp certain meanings. Helpless and without a choice, Han Li finally began studying the Eternal Spring Arts as if his life depended on it, driving straight into piles of different books that were related to old, classical languages. He bitterly studied the incantations' meanings every day and night, racking his brain several tens of times over every phrase and every word. Refusing to quit, Han Li was resolved to completely comprehend all of the techniques listed in the book. Even though he had never gone to a school or academy to obtain a formal education, he understood that making a mistake while cultivating boundlessly powerful energy would be more difficult to deal with than an infuriating obsession and might very well take this small life of his. Thinking of his own personal well-being, Han Li was filled with trepidation and fear, not daring to be even a slight bit careless. After 3 months of intensive research, Han Li finally was able to gain a level of mastery over the theory behind the incantations and apply them. As a result, he was finally starting to truly practice these techniques. However, Han Li's insane method of studying delivered a large mental blow to his enthusiasm and stamina. He had originally planned to rely upon his intelligence, which was enhanced by the Eternal Spring Arts, and thought that learning magic techniques shouldn't be difficult, but who knew that he would suddenly oddly become baffled. He obviously knew the theory behind the techniques, but when it came time to applying them into practice, he could never manage to succeed. No matter what he did, he could not do it right. He did not know whether it was because the spells were wrong, he read the incantations incorrectly, or his magic power was not in the right place. Unable to discover the reason why, Han Li felt extremely slow-witted. Han Li did not know what was causing his failures, but if it was a deficiency in magic power, he would eat another 2 spiritual herbs and the problem would be solved. However, this was a problem that he was unable to wrap his head around. Han Li came to the conclusion that his innate talent for performing celestial arts was not as great as he thought it was. It was only after a long period of bitter training that he finally gained a bit of success in the Fireball technique and the Heaven's Eyes technique. As for the other 3 magic techniques, he did not succeed. He was unable to even reach their initial layers. With great dismay, he could only concentrate on the Fireball technique and Heaven's Eye technique. He placed quite a bit of hope into these 2 celestial arts since they were the only ones he could comprehend. Among these, the Fireball technique's power did not disappoint Han Li. In fact, it greatly surpassed Han Li's expectations. Despite of the fireball technique's small size, it contained a terrifyingly high temperature that could not be underestimated. There was nothing that the fireball technique couldn't burn. Even if the fireball touched a blade made of tempered steel, the area the fireball touched would immediately be melted into liquid steel upon contact. Faced with this inhumanly frightening power, Han Li even threw the fireball into a puddle of water to test it. Upon contact, the reaction of the puddle of water was similar to that of oil, and immediately lit up instead of extinguishing the fireball. After thoroughly understanding the fireball technique's immense power, Han Li finally realized why Yu Zhitong looked down upon mortals with a lofty attitude. Now that Han Li thought about it, a mediocre cultivator who knew a celestial art similar to the fireball technique could easily kill experts in Jiang Hu. If it was a slightly stronger cultivator, then he could easily sweep across Jiang Hu, unrivaled under the heavens. The difference in power was simply too immense. It was no wonder that Yu Zhitong looked at normal mortals as if they were insects he could crush underfoot. Chapter 68 Poisoned. Chapter 68. Poisoned. As for the other techniques, Han Li held high expectations for the Heaven's Eye technique after witnessing the terrifying power that the seemingly simple fireball technique contained. After executing it, however, Han Li understood that this magic technique was simply a small transfer of energy into one's eyes. There was hardly any difficulty worth mentioning, making it appear as if it were easy to master. However, the Heaven's Eye technique seemed easy to master because its difficulty was directly proportional to the strength of its target. It grew increasingly more difficult to master it as the target's strength increased. Its functions focus primarily on checking the strength and purity of the magic power belonging to cultivators, making it a useful support-type magic technique. At first, Han Li was exhilarated and used the Heaven's Eye technique on both of his eyes. He then used his eyes, now filled with magic power, to inspect his own body's condition. Through his enhanced perception, he saw a dim layer of white light permeating his body. The closer he got to his dantian, the more dense the white light became. The white light was his magic power. When Han Li saw this, he couldn't help but extend a hand to touch the white light. However, he felt nothing at all. He noticed that magic power was similar to air. Both were incorporeal and without form, and only through the use of the Heaven's Eye technique could he hope to inspect it. But after several consecutive inspections, Han Li completely lost all interest in the Heaven's Eye technique. His loss of interest was due to the fact that he was all alone in the entire Seven Mysteries sect. Who could he use the Heaven's Eye technique on? He couldn't possibly spend the whole day narcissistically examining himself. Therefore, aside from intensifying his training of the fireball technique, which he hoped to be able to familiarize himself with in order to use it during actual combat, Han Li turned his attention to other types of magic technique that he had yet to learn. He began practicing other magic techniques slowly and in a repetitive manner, hoping for more breakthroughs. Slightly regaining a portion of his body's energy, Han Li could only sigh after thinking about the difficulty of training in other magic techniques. The frequency of his complaints, however, decreased significantly over time as he continued practicing the techniques. Dong, dong, the clock near the valley entrance was sounded, its chimes spreading into the valley. Han Li wrinkled his eyebrows. He didn't know why, but recently, the amount of people who came for help had suddenly increased. Furthermore, a majority of them had broken hands, broken arms, knife wounds, projectile wounds, and other similar external injuries. He did not dare to neglect his patients because aiding a person is like aiding in putting out a fire star. He collected himself and grabbed his medical bag. After exiting his house, Han Li made a beeline for the valley entrance. Outside the valley forest entrance early in the morning, Han Li saw a high-ranking disciple wearing embroidered clothing. The disciple anxiously paced to and fro near the big clock like an ant on a hot pan. Upon seeing Han Li, he immediately hurried towards him. "Dr. Han, please follow me. My master has been poisoned and is on the verge of death. I respectfully ask if you would take a look to see if you can remove the poison from his body." As this person approached, Han Li realized that the disciple had a familiar face. Having seen him a few times, he realized that the man was Elder Li's most favored disciple, Ma Rong, who had previously come to visit Han Li several times on behalf of his master, Elder Li. Therefore, Ma Rong could almost be considered an acquaintance. Poisoned? Han Li asked while immediately walking down the road. As they hurried along, Han Li asking darkly about the details behind Elder Li's misfortune. Han Li was aware that there was some poison that even he himself had no experience with. Yes, my master got into a fight with a member of the feral wolf gang while traveling down the mountains to take care of some business. In the end, he was not careful and suffered an attack from a dark green seed-looking item. At first, my master was not overly worried and even retaliated by killing his opponent. Who knew that the poison would suddenly take effect on the way back up the mountain, causing him to fall unconscious. Have you tried to seek the aid of other doctors? Of course we did. If it was any ordinary poison, then I would not have come to trouble Dr. Han. Those quack doctors, other than knowing that my master suffered from a rare poison, knew nothing else. They did not even dare to prescribe a medicine. Ma Rong spoke with an extremely dissatisfied face. As Han Li listened, his facial expression did not change. As he hurriedly followed Ma Rong down the path, the only noise he made was yin. Soon, however, doubt arose in his heart. Truthfully, he was not extremely well versed in curing poisons. If it was an internal or external injury, he could depend on several types of medicinal herbs. If he had to treat some rare deadly poison, however, he was not sure that he would be able to provide a solution to the problem. Even though he had the pure spirit powder, an antidote that could cure hundreds of poisons, the world contained an innumerable amount of poisons. Who knew whether the pure spirit power could cure the specific poison that was harming Elder Li? The few local doctors were not completely useless in the healing and dispelling poisons. Otherwise, they would have been kicked off the mountain by the elders of the Seven Mysteries sect. After all, the sect could not afford to raise a group of incompetent medical disciples who were unable to heal even the smallest of injuries. However, they did not dare to even prescribe a simple prescription, showing that this poison was a troublesome problem that they have never encountered before. Han Li could only survive by having many hidden cards and being able to adapt himself to any situation. Even if he was unable to save Elder Li, it wasn't likely that it would lower his own reputation. After all, there was no medicinal god that could cure every sickness. As Han Li was carefully refining his plan, Ma Rong practically forced Han Li to run lightly while grasping the sleeves of his garment. In this manner, the two hurried towards Elder Li's residence. Seeing him so energetic, Han Li knew that their master-to-disciple relationship was pretty deep. Han Li felt slightly sorrowful because he thought back to his relationship with Dr. Mo. Although they were master and disciples in name, their actual relationship was similar to two enemies. If only their relationship had been as harmonious as the one between Ma Rong and his master. In the depths of his heart, Han Li had always held a form of respect towards Dr. Mo. After all, his medicinal knowledge and eternal spring arts had been imparted to him by the deceased doctor. But sadly, things were not meant to be. The heavens dictated that the two would be unable to live in the same world, forcing them fight an intensive battle in which Dr. Mo died accidentally by Han Li's own hands. Thinking about his past memories, Han Li couldn't help but sigh. Afterwards, Ma Rong brought him to Elder Li's place. Chapter 69 Li Feiyu and the Young Lady. Chapter 69. Li Feiyu and the young lady Elder Li's residence was not extravagant. Instead, it was merely a small, humble house. Surrounding several houses in close proximity was a 2-meter-high, half-a-meter-thick dirt wall encircling a simple courtyard. Facing the path was an arched, half-moon gateway through which Han Li could see that the courtyard was filled with many visitors. Stepping into the courtyard, Han Li realized that the actual number of people was much higher than what he saw from outside the gate. They gathered in groups of 2s or 3s, discussing Elder Li's state in low voices. Han Li had already heard that Elder Li was a good-natured person in the Seven Mysteries sect. Regardless if one was a lower-ranked disciple or an esteemed colleague, he rarely got angry with anyone, nor did he scramble for power and profit in the sect. As a result, many figures in the sect, both the important and the insignificant, had nothing but compliments for the old man, causing his popularity to be very high. Not that Elder Li was suffering from a poison-induced illness. Everyone with high status in the sect would eventually pay their respects either personally or through a representative. Not a single person failed to do so regardless if their reason for coming was heartfelt or hypocritic. As a result, the courtyard soon became filled by a throng of people. Once Han Li came in, he was recognized by the people in the courtyard. The lowest protectors immediately surrounded him, each striving to be the first to greet him. "How are you, medicinal god Han?" Dr. Han came. A wave of well-wishing rang out and continuously battered his ears. Even if he didn't want to hear the endless noise, he had no choice but to endure. Seeing these faces brimming with enthusiasm, Han Li similarly showed a bright smile that did not lose to the crowd in terms of splendor. However, although he appeared to be extremely courteous, he was actually sick of false pleasantries. Fortunately, those with high status, such as the vice sect leaders and consecrated elders, implicitly nodded their heads in Han Li's direction, showing their acknowledgement of his arrival without making a move to approach him. Seeing that they did not make it uncomfortable for Han Li by making him greet them, Han Li had a good impression about these esteemed individuals. Because of Ma Rong's low status, he was unable to anything besides stand to the side with a look of concern. As the protectors tried to get closer to Han Li with their constant stream of pleasantries, Ma Rong's face revealed worry while both of his bands rubbed against each other non-stop. Finally, after Han Li finished greeting the last person, Ma Rong couldn't wait any longer and immediately rushed forward, grabbing Han Li's arm with one hand and charging straight into the house. This rude and impetuous action angered a few people who wished to get on good terms with medicinal god Han, revealing a bit of their displeasure. On the outside, Han Li had a forced smile, but he was actually quite pleased with Ma Rong's decision. This way, he could finally get rid of those incessantly annoying people without having to offend anyone. With a sense of urgency, Han Li was pulled into living room by Ma Rong. There were not very many people inside, except a few family members and two elders. Sect leader Ma was also there, but what surprised Han Li the most was that Li Feiyu was also inside the room. Han Li was shocked. According to what he knew, there was no relationship between Li Feiyu and Elder Li, so why did he showed here? Just as his stomach was about to burst with questions, Han Li noticed that senior disciple Li was comforting a petite girl with tears flowing down her face. Li Feiyu's highly focused expression was laced with traces of emotion, a look that was very different from the one he usually showed to his fellow disciples. Looking at Li Feiyu's enamored appearance, Han Li suddenly realized what was going on. Startled, he couldn't help but think that it was extremely funny. Han Li promptly and carefully scrutinized the young lady's appearance, wanting to see just what kind of beauty could make Li Feiyu disregard everything for the sake of love. The young lady looked to be around 15 to 16 years of age and was wearing a jasper hairpin. In addition, she wore a lotus green dress, giving the originally sweet and pleasant facial features a naughty and mischievous air. Despite of this, her two eyes were swollen red, making her seem lovely yet pathetic. Her dejected appearance gave people an urge to lovingly bring her into a hugging embrace. Z's! She really is one fair young lady. Han Li exclaimed for several moments in his heart, thinking that Li Feiyu falling under this lady's love snare was pardonable. In his heart, there was still a trace of envy and jealousy, not knowing when he himself would also be able to have an intimate companion. Maybe it was because he realized that Han Li was studying this young lady, but Ma Rong was quick to introduce everyone within the house to Han Li in order for him to establish a sense of familiarity. Sect leader Ma and a white-faced elder Qian whom Han Li had saw before naturally did not need any introductions, and he immediately took the initiative to step forward to check the body. Greetings, sect leader Ma, elder Qian. He. The young Dr. Han has arrived. Sect leader Ma acted as if he were Han Li's close friend, almost as if there was no difference between their status. Dr. Han is Dr. Han, why do you have to mention the word young? Han Li silently cursed within his heart in disagreement with sect leader Ma's phrase. On the other hand, Elder Qian's attitude was cold and detached. He merely nodded his head, acting in complete opposite to sect leader Ma. Han Li was not offended by Elder Qian's indifference, since he knew that Elder Qian practiced a special cultivation method that required him to sever his feelings and desires, causing him to treat everyone with the same cold and indifferent attitude. In addition to sect leader Ma and Elder Qian, there was another tall, sturdy, and red-faced elder with whom Han Li wasn't familiar with. This elder's palms were rough and coarse, and all 10 of his short fingers were thick and solid. From this, it was evident from a single glance that this elder trained in a special martial art. This is Elder Zhao, my master's close friend. His previously job was to supervise the treasure-gathering division outside the mountain. He just came back 2 days ago. Ma Rong said while introducing the elder to Han Li. Towards Han Li, Elder Zhao was neither cold nor warm. He made an en sound with his nose, not saying a word, but the doubt in his eyes was evident. He clearly didn't trust the invited medicinal god Han's skills due to his young age. Since Elder Zhao didn't seem to have a favorable attitude towards him, Han Li would naturally not take the initiative to fawn over Elder Zhao. Following Elder Zhao's example, Han Li used a flat tone to give his respects, then tried his best to avoid the other person. Tomorrow I will bring myself together and amend all the unreasonable areas the readers have brought to my attention, so I can only release 1 chapter today. I hope that the readers will forgive me. I will strive to make this book even more amazing than it currently is. Thank you all for your patience. Chapter 70. Instigation. It was obvious that sect leader Ma sensed the pair's animosity. Not only was he not worried, his face revealed a hint of a cheerful look. Even though young Dr. Han is of a young age, his medicinal skills can be said to have reached perfection. I believe that under Dr. Han's care, Elder Li can rise from the brink of death, he suddenly said, praising Han Li's medicinal abilities. Really? With him being so young, is his medicinal expertise that exceptional? Well, I don't really believe you. Don't tell me that his medicinal knowledge is even better than Dr. Mo's medicinal knowledge. After hearing these words, a few family members became at a loss, unsure of what to do. They didn't want to place Elder Li's fate in Han Li's hands, nor did they even hope that this little medicinal god could cure the poison and save his life. To open their mouths to refute Elder Zhao's words also did not seem appropriate. The party in question was Elder Li's friend and also an elder in the Seven Mysteries sect. He. Elder Zhao is not aware that little Dr. Han is Dr. Mo's proud disciple, and his medicinal expertise already far surpasses that of Dr. Mo. Vice sect leader secretly smirked, adding firewood to the fire. Even if this little boy of about years of age started learning when he was still in his mother's womb, how exceptional can his medicinal expertise be? I still won't believe you unless I personally see it with my own eyes, said Elder Zhao, shaking his head like a palm leaf fan. He was still unwilling to directly criticize Han Li and thus fall under vice sect leader's trap by offending someone whom he shouldn't have offended. Elder Zhao might have seemed like a rude and impetuous individual, but regardless of his attitude, he was not a fool who would rashly insult another member of the sect without confirming the identity of the person he was judging. After all, he had been able to hold the high status of an elder and maintain this position. In response, Han Li rolled his eyes, thinking to himself, why do I need to prove to you whether my medical skills are good enough? He knew that sect leader Ma intentionally drew out this response, but Han Li still felt a bit depressed. It was very apparent that this Elder Zhao and sect leader Ma were not of the same faction and even had a bit of a hostile relationship. The mixed circular palm that Elder Zhao practices in has been trained to perfection. Its might is boundless. Sect leader Ma said. Seeing Han Li look displeased with Elder Zhao, sect leader Ma felt the joy within his heart become even stronger, making him uncontrollably cry out random and strange phrases. Hang! How can it compare to sect leader Ma's highly polished mysterious yin finger? It seemed that Elder Zhao did not care for the other's identity as a vice sect master. Deadpanned and with no traces of politeness, Vice Sect Master Ma retaliated with a phrase of his own. Ha ha! Elder Zhao has wrongly praised me. It was evident that sect leader Ma, a type of person who hid knives within their smiles. He did not really mind Elder Zhao's sarcastic tone, smiling as he calmly received the other's false compliment. This was not the first time Elder Zhao had faced this type of situation, nor could he do anything about it. He could only shut his mouth, unwilling to nag with his thick-skinned opponent. He inwardly felt that there was something he couldn't wrap his mind around concerning the other's words. Even though sect leader Ma was not in the same faction as Elder Zhao, This was the first time they had revealed the conflicts of the upper echelons in front of so many juniors. It was unknown whether there were any tricks involved. As he listened to the two opposing parties exchanging harsh words, Han Li's expression did not change in the least as he pretended to be ignorant and unknowing of everything. But within his heart, he knew that sect leader Ma was once again trying to instigate a rift in the relationship between Han Li and Elder Zhao. Sect leader Ma had been indirectly attacking his opponents with words ever since he met Han Li, trying to rope this highly skilled medicinal god into his faction, thus expanding his influence. However, Han Li had never even considered joining the Seven Mysteries sect's internal struggle for power. It was not because he was intentionally aloof from political and material pursuits or that he was arrogant, but because ever since he came into contact with Dr. Mo, Yu Zhitong, and similar people of high status, his aspirations were a lot higher, especially since he learned two different types of spells. He already viewed the Seven Mysteries sect's internal struggle with minimal importance. Although Han Li was not weak, he did not want to offend those of a higher status. It was for this reason that he chose to avoid giving a clear reply, neither accepting nor declining the invitations from the upper echelon. Just like that, it was sect leader Ma's turn to have endless headaches. Even though Han Li's profound medicinal skills made it so that he could act stubbornly, Han Li was dragging out his response for too long of a period, making sect leader Ma extremely frustrated. To this day, Han Li had still refused to join his faction, nor had he given a direct answer. But in order to prevent Han Li from entering other factions, sect leader Ma had to do his best to ruin the relationship between Han Li and the other upper echelon members, inciting disharmony. Whether these childish tactics were effective or not, Han Li did not know, but up until today it was the first time that an upper-level faction had annoyed him greatly. Right now, sect leader Ma was doing his best to undermine Han Li's opinion of Elder Zhao, presumably wanting him to have no good memories of this elder. Ma Rong, noticing the start of a C*Seek fight, felt a bit of panic within his heart and hurriedly continued his introductions. "This is my master's wife, Li Shi." He began by pointing at a middle-aged woman who had some resemblance to the young lady. This is, the young lady by Li Feiyu's side was introduced last. Her name was Zhong Xiao'er. Unexpectedly, she was Elder Li's niece. When he introduced Li Feiyu, the other intentionally pretended to not recognize Han Li, revealing a cool, unapproachable appearance. This made Ma Rong, who had initiated the introductions himself, feel awkward. He hurriedly whispered an explanation to Han Li, saying, "Protector Li has always been like this. This is his normal temperament and is not specifically directed at you, Dr. Han, so please do not take this personally." Han Li smiled slightly, knowing that Li Feiyu did not want to reveal their relationship in front of so many people. "His demeanor means nothing to me. I would not lower myself by begging for attention from other people. Right now, it is better to look at Elder Li's condition than to waste time by arguing. Saving lives is more important." Han Li intentionally made a dismissive comment toward Li Feiyu. Ma Rong, upon hearing this, put his heart at ease and invited everybody into the bedroom of the sick patient. After hearing Han Li's statement, Li Feiyu's lips twitched a bit, appearing nonchalant. When everyone turned their bodies, he suddenly made a funny face towards Han Li's direction, then quickly returned to his normal appearance, making it seem as if nothing had happened. Han Li strongly resisted his urge to smile. Soon after, he closely followed senior disciple Li's footsteps, coming up to the front of Elder Li's bed. Upon seeing the facial features of the person on the bed, the normally bold Han Li couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. Now he finally understood why the other doctors were not willing to prescribe medicine. Right now, the originally benign-faced senior Elder Li remained unconscious, but there were spots of poison, the size of copper coins, extending from his face to his neck region and from his hands to his legs. Each spot of poison appeared to be different from the others because they varied in a plethora of abnormally bright colors. Everyone who saw them became visibly apprehensive. What was even more problematic for Han Li was that Elder Li's lips were greenish-black and his facial features were enshrouded in a layer of dark air. This meant that the poison was in its late stages, thus making the complex task of saving Elder Li's small life more difficult.